Early Greek philosophy, religion and basic beliefs. History of psychology, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. Well, let's start by looking at how the Greeks attempted to make sense of the universe. Before we go there, let me just remind you about a couple of things. First, I'm going to brag. I have my official Fresno Greek Festival t-shirt on. Kind of add a little color to this game. It's got the three great philosophers on the back, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And I guess when I get to those guys, I ought to wear the shirt backwards. Well, now to the topic. When we talk about the ancient Greeks, we have to remember that we're talking about a time very different from ours, not only in terms of technology, which there wasn't a whole lot of, but the social order and the system. Most of the philosophers we're going to hear about were rich guys, because only rich guys were educated, and only rich guys had the leisure time to philosophize. So we have to remember a time with no phones, no lights, no motor cars, just as primitive as can be, except it's not stuck on a desert island. If you've watched old TV, you know that was the Gilligan's Island theme. No technology as we know it, pretty much. People lived pretty much with nature, even if they were a city dweller. I read a interesting set of papers on ancient life, and one of the things that most caught my attention was what individuals picked up and perceived coming close to a large city. Now, when we think of ancient Greece, ancient Rome, we think about things like the Parthenon, the Colosseum, all those kind of cool things, and we think about them being intact. But it's not those cool things that people thought of first as they entered a large city. The closer people got to a larger city, the first thing they noticed about it was the smell. And it did smell really, really bad. Because in addition to having low levels of technology, there were extremely low levels of sanitation. There were some attempts at sewers and things like that. And the Romans did a pretty good job, but it took until their technology to kind of get there. I think that just gives you a kind of interesting context to how the universe worked back then. So people were very, very close to nature, even in the city. They relied on things that were farmed locally. If something was out of season, you just didn't get it. You didn't get tomatoes shipped from Mexico like we get today out when tomatoes are out of season up here. So technology was very, very different. Think of how long you would last without the modern conveniences you have. I would probably have to do surgery to take your cell phone away from many of you. That wasn't there. No television. News moved very, very, very slowly. No social media. Well, that may be one good thing. So, as we think about the Greeks and what they're thinking, some of the ideas are going to be very simplistic in our minds. But they were the first ones in the West to start doing philosophy, which later turns into psychology. Now, we do have to give some credence to the fact that there were advanced civilizations around before Greek times in the Mideast, Egypt, Babylonia, places like that, India, and Asia, especially China. So most textbooks start with Western stuff. I like to linger on the old Greek stuff a little longer because, well, I find it fun to teach, and it's my class, so I get to do that. And two, I think that the Greeks asked a lot of questions that stood as major philosophical questions throughout historical time, and some of them still aren't answered today. So let's get Greek. Now, okay, now as the slide moves, we can talk. One of the things we need to talk about is how Greeks viewed the world. As I said in my introductory remarks, they looked at the world as being a very back to nature place. And there was a strong belief in animism. Now, animism is the notion that everything has a soul and a spirit. And that could be anything. In their opinion, all things that exist, animals, plants, even rocks, things like a river, weather, human handiwork, and even maybe words are animated and have spirits and are alive. In fact, to this day, we still talk about extremely bad weather, hurricanes, typhoons, and we name them. So we're naming these inanimate things. We talk about other kind of things as living. I picked up the habit from my mother of talking to my car. And especially if it's behaving badly and it's not doing what I want it to do. If it starts talking back to me, yes, I will go to a clinician. But we know we can't talk to our cars and get a reasonable answer. We can't reason with them. We can't use logic with them. I can't tell you how many times, need a sip. In recent days, I've cursed out my computer as I'm having trouble working some of this technology. So I've animatized things. However, I know that's just for fun and just to let out a little steam. But the Greeks really believed it. And they believed that a spirit permeated every animate and inanimate objects. And in turn, the spirit was real. Now, over time, spirit was used with a variety of names. It could be called breath, soul, spirit. You may have heard of the ghost in the machine. Or how about psyche, the root name of our field, psychology? Well, along with anonism, you get the idea of anthropomorphizing things. And anthropomorphication is simply the projection of human characteristics onto nature or inanimate things. If you've ever seen the movie Beauty and the Beast, or any similar kind of thing, and I've got a still here, you see that the candle, the clock, the tea kettle, and then, what is it in the back there, a spoon, have eyes, ears, and mouths. And they talk, at least in a Disney movie. If your silverware starts talking to you, ask me for a referral to the counseling center. And we may project other kinds of characteristics onto nature. For example, we talk about the water being calm, the earth quakes in anger. And since the Greeks believed these things had spirits, they actually thought that a volcano could be angry and decide to explode. That water can be calm and relaxed and mellow, or choppy, or rough. I grew up on the Great Lakes and been out in rough water many times and sat and bobbed up and down in a boat when we were out fishing. But I didn't think the water was being rough to me or bullying me. It just was the weather. But we tend to do these kinds of things to this very day. Let's now take a look at early Greek religion. There were two primary forms of Greek religion. The Olympian religion, which we'll talk about first, and the Diassic Orphic religion, which we'll talk about second. Now, there were some classes stuffed with this. The Olympian religion was mainly the religion of the upper classes. Let's take a look at that form of religion first. So here's Mount Olympus, all the gods arranged around it. This is a picture from 1530 by Julio Romano, sorry for my bad pronunciation, The Fall of the Giants. And the giants and the titans were in opposition to the Olympian Greek gods who eventually won out. And the gods ruled the earth from Mount Olympus. Here's Zeus, the god of thunder, holding a thunderbolt. He's the main god, and he has rule over all of the other gods and the entire earth. Only problem is, the other gods kind of can get a little out of hand once in a while. Old Zeus, had a tendency to like to fool around with other women besides his wife, including mortal or human women. Hercules is Zeus's son with a mortal woman, which made his wife Hera extremely angry, and she constantly caused trouble for Hercules, throwing burdens in his way, throwing barriers in his way. If you look at the old Greek discussions of this, the old Greek stories of Hercules and Zeus and Hera, it gets pretty spicy. Not anything like the very watered down G-rated Disney version of the Hercules movie. This isn't a great picture of the major gods. I don't expect you to memorize them by any means. But another picture, Zeus, Hera. You have Apollo, Athena, and someplace there, I'm looking over into the picture there, we have Pan, and I thought Bacchus was here, the god of wine. Oh well, he must be off drinking someplace. Well, what is the key point about the Olympian religion? In the Olympian religion, the psyche survived death but had no reminiscence of a previous life. Kind of went to the world of Hades, the underworld, and just kind of lingered there. It was the primary view of the ruling class. And the Olympian gods, or the Olympian religion, I should say, taught orderliness and rationality and valued intelligence. Now, one other thing that you should know that's really important about the Olympian religion is that when you died and had no really reminiscent of your previous life and went on the other side of the river Styx. You were just there. So the best time of an individual's existence in the Olympian religion was while they were alive. So there was a large hedonistic component to it, meaning most people thought, or most Olympian religious people, or the rich people thought, hey, I've got it now. I may as well flaunt it. I may as well enjoy life because there's not going to be a whole lot to look forward to in the future. Now, I was just watching a video on medieval Europe, and they were talking about how many people were in what categories. And I have a feeling it's pretty applicable to Greek times too, even though it was medieval Europe. And the scholar that I'm listening to stated that in Europe, probably 5% of people were the upper classes. 5% were the religious and other kind of privileged people. And the other 90% were peasants, serfs, people of low level. Now, in Greece, this not only included the peasants and farmers and those type of people, but there were a significant number of individuals who were slaves. And slavery was a common practice during that time. And people were often enslaved because, well, they couldn't pay debts. More typically, they were captured in war and sold as the prize of battle. But most of the people were the poor and the slaves, and basically the poorly treated. So let's look at a contrast to the Olympian religion. That's the Diasic Orphic religion. You got a rather radically different view of the soul here. Now, individuals believing in the Diasic Orphic religion tend to believe in reincarnation. And so in any given life, the soul is locked in body as punishment for some transgression from a previous existence. And if you were a peasant, a laborer, a slave, you probably didn't have a really, really great life. It probably was full of challenges. You were probably hungry much of the time. You might have been out in the elements. You most likely were abused by those people above you. Not that great. So why believe in any religion? Well, here's what happens with this form of belief. In the Diasic Orphic religion, individuals believed in transmigration of the soul. And this is the idea that the soul moves from an imperfect world to a perfect heaven. And it's probably not the first, and it certainly wasn't the last form of belief that counted on the notion that there's got to be something better than this. So individuals believing in the Diasic Orphic religion believed that all the pain and suffering is worth it, because if I behave, I do well, I'll go to a better place. And if I make up for all my transgressions in previous lives, I'll continue to go to better and better places. So there really were two major Greek religions that were very much based on class. The Diasic Orphic was for the poor people. It promised something better in the future. The Olympian religion was for the rich. It said the good life is now, so better enjoy it. Well, I hope you did somewhat enjoy this first foray into our look at the Greeks. Our next video lecture will look at the philosopher Thales and some of the pre-Socratic thinkers. See you then. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020, Professor Michael Botwin, all rights reserved.